Montana Territory, 1876. Against the backdrop of snow-covered mountains, a pregnant widow named Clara Bellamy faces certain death after being cast out from her wagon train, blamed for her husband's death and carrying secrets that could destroy lives. She collapses beside a frozen trail as storm clouds gather overhead. But fate has different plans. That night, Silas Whitlock, a wealthy cattle baron with his own dark past as a Civil War sniper, discovers her half-frozen body in the growing darkness. Taking her to his sprawling ranch house, he intends to offer only temporary shelter. Neither expects how their lives will intertwine or the dangers that await as spring thaws the frozen ground. Will the secrets they both carry tear them apart, or forge an unbreakable bond in the harsh Montana wilderness? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The wagon train ledger lay open on Martha Bellamy's lap, its pages crisp with frost. Her gnarled fingers traced the neat columns of names, stopping at the fresh ink marking her son's death. Samuel Bellamy, deceased October 15th, 1876. Below it, a line had been struck through another name. Clara Bellamy, expelled. 3 days earlier, Clara had stood before the Wagon Train Council, her chin held high despite the tears freezing on her cheeks. The morning sun cast long shadows across the gathered faces, some sympathetic, others hard with judgment. Her mother-in-law's voice had cut through the bitter dawn air like a knife. "She killed my boy," Martha had declared, clutching Samuel's pocket watch. First with her willful ways, then with her negligence. The old woman's eyes had burned with the peculiar fury of a mother's grief. No proper wife would have let him check the pass alone. Clara's hands had instinctively moved to shield her swelling belly. "I begged him to wait for the scouts," she'd whispered, but the words had fallen on deaf ears. The truth, the real reason Samuel had ridden ahead, pressed against her heart like a stone. The council's verdict had been swift and merciless. Clara watched as her few possessions were divided among the other families, payment for her supposed debts. They'd left her with only her mother's Bible, the clothes she wore, and enough provisions for 3 days. "More mercy than you showed my son," Martha had spat. Now, trudging through the deepening snow, Clara remembered Samuel's last words to her. "I won't let them hurt you anymore." He'd ridden into that mountain pass carrying more than just their hopes for a new life in Montana Territory. In his saddlebag had been evidence that would have destroyed his mother's standing in the wagon train, proof of corruption that ran deeper than the winter frost. The baby kicked, a reminder of life amid so much death. Clara pressed her hand against the spot, whispering a promise. "Your papa was a good man, little one. Don't let anyone tell you different." The wind howled in response, driving needles of ice against her face. Ahead, the mountains loomed like giants' teeth against the darkening sky. Somewhere beyond them lay Sweetwater Valley, where Samuel's cousin had promised them sanctuary. But with the pass snowed in and no horse to carry her, Clara knew she'd never make it. Already her legs trembled with each step, and the cold had seeped so deep she could barely feel her feet. A wolf howled in the distance, and Clara clutched her Bible closer. Inside, pressed between the pages of Psalms, lay the letter that had cost Samuel his life and might yet cost Clara hers. The truth it contained would have to wait for warmer days, if they ever came. Silas Whitlock hadn't meant to ride out so late. The storm was building in the northwest, stacking dark clouds like cordwood against the mountains. But something, call it instinct, call it restlessness, had driven him to check the property's boundaries one last time. His rifle, a custom Sharps from his war days, rode in its scabbard beside him, its scope carefully wrapped against the weather. 20 years of peace hadn't dulled his sniper's eye. Even in the failing light, he spotted the irregular shape by the trail marker. His horse, Buck, snorted and pulled against the reins, catching a scent on the wind. "Easy, old friend," Silas murmured, though his own spine had stiffened with wartime vigilance. Drawing closer, the shape resolved itself into a woman's form, half buried in snow. His first thought was that he'd found another victim of the territory's harsh justice. But then he saw the slight rise and fall of her chest, the protective curl of her arms around her middle. Silas dismounted, his bad knee protesting the cold. The war had left him with more than just memories and a sniper's scope. He knelt beside her, noting the quality of her clothes, worn but well made. No wedding ring, but a pale band where one had recently been. And beneath the layers of wool and cotton, the unmistakable swell of advanced pregnancy. "Ma'am," his voice was rough from disuse. Living alone had that effect. When she didn't respond, he pressed 2 fingers against her neck, finding a pulse, thready but persistent. The decision to help her ward with his long-standing policy of avoiding other people's troubles. The last time he'd played savior, but no, best not to dwell on that. The woman stirred slightly, a soft moan escaping her blue-tinged lips. "Damn it all," Silas muttered, already shrugging out of his heavy coat. He wrapped it around her before, lifting her onto Buck. The horse stomped uneasily, but held steady, a reminder of why Silas had paid so dearly for him at the army auction. The woman's eyelids fluttered as he mounted behind her. "Samuel?" she whispered. "No, ma'am. Name's Whitlock. You're safe now." The words felt strange in his mouth, promises he wasn't sure he could keep. But the alternative was leaving her to die, and he'd seen enough death for several lifetimes. The first fat snowflakes began to fall as they started toward the ranch house. Silas couldn't shake the feeling that he was riding into something more complicated than a simple rescue. He'd learned in the war that timing was everything, both for taking a shot and for staying alive. Whatever storm was coming, it wasn't. Just the one overhead. His ranch hand, Miguel, was waiting at the stable door, lantern held high. The old Mexican's eyebrows rose at the sight of their unexpected guest, but he asked no questions as he helped Silas dismount with his burden. "Maria still up at the house?" Silas asked, knowing Miguel's wife would know better what to do with a half-frozen woman than either of them. "Si, patron. She is making soup." Miguel's dark eyes took in the situation with the wisdom of his 70 years. "I will tell her to prepare the east room." Silas nodded his thanks, already carrying the woman toward the house. She felt too light in his arms, as if the cold had stolen more than just her warmth. Against his chest, he could feel the flutter of her heartbeat, like a bird trapped in a closing fist. The east room had been his sister's once upon a time. He hadn't opened it in years, but emergency had a way of breaking down old barriers. As he laid the woman on the bed, her eyes opened briefly, clear brown eyes that seemed to look straight through him. "Why?" she asked, the word barely a whisper. Silas found himself without an answer. Why indeed? He'd sworn off involvement in others' lives after the war, after Rebecca, after everything. But something about this woman's situation tugged at him, like an old wound that never quite healed right. "Rest," he said finally. "We'll sort it out come morning." If morning came. The storm was hitting full force now, rattling the windows like angry fists. Silas touched the rifle scope in his pocket, a habit from darker days, and wondered what other storms this woman would bring to his quiet world. Maria's weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency as she sorted through her medicine box, a testament to 30 years of healing on the frontier. Cedar bark for fever, willow bark for pain, dried yarrow for bleeding. But it was the small bottle of laudanum that gave her pause. The woman in the bed needed rest, but with child. "No drugging," Silas said from the doorway, reading her thoughts. "Not unless there's no choice." Maria nodded, selecting instead a packet of dried elderberry flowers. "Your mother taught me well, patron." She didn't miss how he flinched at the mention of his mother, the long-dead frontier doctor who'd first shown Maria how to combine Mexican herb lore with Western medicine. Clara stirred on the bed, her eyes opening with more clarity than they'd shown since her rescue. "The baby." Her hands moved protectively. And to her belly is moving strong, Maria assured her, having checked while changing Clara into one of Rebecca's old nightgowns. But you, Senora, need broth and warmth before anything else. Silas shifted uncomfortably, clearly wanting to leave, but held by some sense of responsibility. The woman's gaze found him, and something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, of fellow wounded souls. Mr. Whitlock, Clara's voice was stronger now. I don't know how to thank you. Don't. The word came out harder than he'd intended. He softened his tone. Just focus on getting well. Whatever brought you to my land can wait until you're stronger. But Clara pushed herself up against the pillows, dignity gathering around her like a cloak despite her circumstances. I won't take advantage of your hospitality without honesty. I'm Clara Bellamy, recently widowed and, her voice caught, recently expelled from the Sweetwater Valley wagon train. The name meant nothing to Silas, but Maria's sharp intake of breath suggested otherwise. The housekeeper's dark eyes met, his warning in them. The Sweetwater Valley train was notorious for its rigid leadership and harsh justice. Expelled? Silas found himself asking, despite his resolution to stay uninvolved. In your condition? They blamed me for my husband's death. Clara's hands twisted in the quilt, one of Maria's making, bright with Mexican colors. They were wrong, but grief needs a target, and I was convenient. Maria clucked her tongue, mixing herbs with the efficiency of long practice. Men make laws, but they do not carry children. Here, drink this. It will help with the chill. Clara accepted the cup, but her eyes never left Silas. I won't bring trouble to your door, Mr. Whitlock. Once the storm passes, the storm's likely to last a week. Silas moved to the window, watching snow erase the boundaries of his ordered world. And you're in no condition to travel. I have funds, Clara began. But Maria cut her off with a wave of her hand. Hush now. The patron has spoken. Besides, she added with a knowing look, spring cattle work needs more hands than just Miguel and me. Perhaps God sent you to us for a reason. Silas shot her a sharp look, recognizing her matchmaking tone. But before he could object, Clara spoke again. I know how to cook, clean, and keep books. I won't be a burden. Pride and desperation mingled in her voice. And I can help with the spring calving. My father ran cattle in Kansas before the war. The mention of the war made Silas's hand drift to his pocket, where the scope lay heavy as memory. He'd learned in those blood-soaked years that every choice had consequences, every act of mercy its price. We'll see, he said finally. For now, rest. Maria, make sure she has everything she needs. He turned to go, then paused. Mrs. Bellamy, welcome to Whitlock Ranch. The words surprised them both. As he strode down the hallway, Silas heard Maria begin to hum an old Mexican lullaby, the same one she'd sung to Rebecca during her fevers. Behind him, the door closed on Clara Bellamy and all the complications she represented. In his study, Silas poured 2 fingers of whiskey and stared into the fire. The woman's presence had already begun to change things, stirring up dust in rooms long closed, bringing life to spaces left dormant. Even Miguel seemed to walk with more purpose, as if the ranch itself was waking from a long winter's sleep. Damn, he muttered, but there was less bite in it than usual. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside something else entirely was brewing, something that felt uncomfortably like hope. The yellowed newspaper clippings haunted Silas's desk drawer like old ghosts. Sharpshooter's toll. 32 confirmed kills at Gettysburg, one headline screamed. Below it, a more recent cutting. Whitlock heir returns to Montana, war hero to rebuild family ranch. The stories painted him as some kind of legend, never mentioning the cost of becoming one. A knock at the study door interrupted his brooding. Enter, he called, hastily shutting the drawer. Clara stood in the doorway, stronger after a week of Maria's care, but still pale. She held a stack of ledgers. I finished organizing the cattle records, she said. You're losing money on the south pasture fence line. Silas gestured to a chair, noting how she moved carefully, one hand never far from her belly. Explain. She settled into the leather armchair, spreading the books across his desk. Her finger traced down columns of numbers with surprising authority. The repairs are constant because it's built in a wash. Come spring thaw. A sudden grimace crossed her face. She pressed both hands to her side, breathing shallow. "Mrs. Bellamy?" Silas rose, concern overriding his usual reserve. "I'm fine," she managed, but her face had gone chalk white. "The baby just—" Another spasm hit, stronger this time. Silas was already striding to the door. "Maria!" His voice carried the same command it had in war, when every second counted. The housekeeper appeared as if conjured, took one look at Clara and began barking orders in mixed Spanish and English. "Fetch my box, patron, and water, hot water." Hours later, Clara lay sleeping in the east room. The crisis passed, but leaving questions in its wake. Maria's face was grave as she reported to Silas in the hallway. "The child is strong, but the mother—" She shook her head. "Such distress. So late in the carrying, it's not good. She needs rest, peace." Her dark eyes fixed on Silas. "She needs a home, patron." "This isn't—" Silas began. But Maria cut him off. "You think I don't see? How you watch her when she's not looking, how she brings light to rooms long dark." The old woman's voice softened. "Rebecca would want—" "Don't." The word came out like a rifle shot. "Don't use my sister to manipulate me, Maria." But later, alone in his study, Silas found himself pulling out another newspaper clipping, this one carefully preserved, despite its age. "Tragedy strikes Whitlock Ranch. Influenza claims mother and daughter." The story was brief, mentioning only that his mother had died trying to save his sister, both of them gone within days of each other while he was still at war. A sound drew his attention to the doorway. Clara stood there, wrapped in a shawl against the evening chill. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I couldn't sleep, and I saw the light." Silas quickly folded the clipping, but not before she glimpsed its contents. Understanding filled her eyes. Not pity, but something deeper. "We're quite a pair, aren't we?" she said, easing herself into the chair across from him. "Both haunted by what we've lost." "At least your husband died honorably," Silas said, the words bitter in his mouth. "I was marking targets when my family needed me most." Clara was quiet for a long moment. "Honor is a complicated thing, Mr. Whitlock. Samuel, my husband, he died trying to protect me. But the truth of it—" She stopped, one hand moving to her belly, in what Silas now recognized as a protective gesture. "The truth of it would shock the good people of the wagon train," he finished for her. A sad smile touched her lips. "The truth of it would destroy them, or at least their faith in their leaders." She met his eyes steadily. "We all have our ghosts, Mr. Whitlock. The question is whether we let them rule us." The grandfather clock in the hall struck midnight, its deep tones echoing through the house. Clara rose carefully, the moonlight from the window casting her face in silver shadow. For a moment, she looked almost like Rebecca, young, brave, facing an uncertain future with quiet determination. "Thank you," she said softly, "for not asking questions I'm not ready to answer." After she left, Silas sat long into the night, the war-worn scope on his desk beside the newspaper clippings. Outside, the winter wind moaned like distant rifle fire. But for the first time in years, its sound didn't take him back to Gettysburg. Instead, he found himself thinking of spring, of new life, of possibilities he'd thought forever lost in the smoke of war. Clara's garden journal lay open on the kitchen table, its pages filled with careful sketches and notations. "Tomatoes against the south wall," she'd written. "Root vegetables in the lower beds." The neat rows of planned plantings looked like hope mapped out in ink and paper. "My mother tried a garden here once," Silas said from behind her. Clara didn't startle. She'd grown used to his quiet way of moving. "Nothing much grew except the herbs. Your mother didn't have Maria's grandmother's secrets." Clara patted the small packet of seeds the housekeeper had given her, wrapped in a scrap of red cloth. Or my father's stubborn streak. The February morning streamed through the windows, surprisingly warm. The snow was retreating from the kitchen garden, revealing dark earth that smelled of possibility. Clara had been at the ranch for 3 weeks. Now, each day bringing more strength and dangerously more reasons to stay. "You should be resting," Silas said, but the words lacked conviction. They both knew she did better when occupied, when her hands and mind were busy with something other than memories. "I've rested enough." Clara closed the journal, running her fingers over its leather cover. Another of Silas's unexpected kindnesses. "The baby does better when I'm moving, and besides..." She met his eyes. "I want to give something back, make something grow here." Something shifted in Silas's expression, a softening around the eyes that made him look younger, more like the man he might have been without war's harsh schooling. "You've already done that." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks and busied herself with her notes. "Miguel says the south pasture fence needs checking before the spring melt makes the ground too soft." "Miguel talks too much," Silas grumbled, but Clara caught the ghost of a smile as he turned away. "I'll ride out after breakfast. I could..." Clara began. "No!" The word was firm but gentle. "Not in your condition. Not yet." He paused at the door. "But maybe you could show me those garden plans over supper." It was the first time he'd suggested sharing a meal beyond the formal breakfasts and dinners where Maria hovered like a hopeful matchmaker. Clara felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the baby. "I'd like that," she said softly. After he left, Clara opened the journal again, adding notes about soil preparation. But her mind wandered to other things. The way Silas's hands moved when he talked about the ranch, how his voice changed when he spoke of his sister, the careful distance he kept, even as something drew him closer day by day. Maria found her there, lost in thought. The housekeeper took one look at Clara's face and clicked her tongue. "Ah, mi palomita, the heart does not ask permission before it chooses." "Maria," Clara protested, but the older woman waved her off. "I see how he watches you when you work in the kitchen, like a man who has forgotten he is thirsty until he sees water." Maria began pulling out ingredients for bread, her movements sure and practiced. "And you? You bloom like my desert flowers after rain." "It's not that simple." Clara's hand strayed to her belly, to the child that tied her to another man. "Another life. There are complications. Life is complications, Nina." "But love," Maria shrugged. "Love is simple. We make it hard with our fears, our past, our pride. But at its heart, simple." A sound from the yard drew them to the window. Silas was mounting his horse, the morning sun catching the silver in his hair. As if feeling their gaze, he looked up. His eyes met Clara's, held for a moment that seemed to stretch like warm honey. Then he was riding away, and Clara returned to her journal. But now she added other notes among the garden plans. The way morning light played on frost, how winter wind could carry the promise of spring, what it meant to find safe harbor after storm. "Simple," she whispered, tasting the word like a prayer. Outside, the first crocuses were pushing through the melting snow, defiant and delicate all at once. In her garden journal, Clara drew them carefully, these brave harbingers of change. Beside the sketch she wrote, "Some things grow stronger, for having endured the cold." The letter fell from between the Bible's pages as Clara was dusting the East Room shelves. Yellow paper, folded and refolded so many times the creases had gone soft. She hadn't meant to look at it again, had sworn she wouldn't until the baby was born. But now, seeing Samuel's familiar handwriting, her hands trembled. "My dearest Clara," it began, "if you're reading this, then my mother's greed has finally caught up with us both. The ledgers I found prove everything. The missing supplies, the inflated fees, the deaths that were really sales to passing traders. She's been bleeding the wagon train families dry for years." "Mrs. Bellamy?" Clara startled, instinctively pressing the letter to her chest. Silas stood in the doorway, his expression shifting from concern to something sharper as he noted her reaction. "I'm fine," she said quickly. Too quickly. He stepped into the room, boots silent on the wooden floor. "You're white as a sheet." His eyes fell to the paper in her hands. Bad news. Old news. Clara sank into the window seat, suddenly tired of carrying the weight alone. "Mr. Whitlock, have you ever discovered something so terrible about someone you trusted that it changed everything?" Silas's hand moved to his pocket, to the scope she knew now, his talisman of harder times. Once or twice. Clara smoothed the letter on her lap, the words blurring through unshed tears. "My mother-in-law, Martha Bellamy. She wasn't just the wagon master's wife. She was stealing from the train, selling supplies meant for widows and children, marking up prices until families went into debt they could never repay. And your husband found out." Samuel was good with numbers. Too good, Clara's voice caught. "He discovered the truth just before we reached the pass. He was going to expose it all, but first—" She touched her belly. "First, he wanted to get me somewhere safe. He knew what his mother was capable of." Silas's expression darkened. "The pass. Was it really an accident?" "I don't know." The admission hurt like a physical pain. "But I know Martha saw him checking the ledgers the night before. And I know she sent him to scout alone, against all custom." A log shifted in the fireplace, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, the March wind carried the first hints of spring, but in the room, winter's chill seemed to return. "This letter," Silas said carefully. "It names names, dates, amounts." Clara nodded. "Everything." Samuel was thorough. He meant it to go to the territorial marshal, but you're carrying his child." Silas's voice was gentle with understanding. "And a dead man's accusations, without proof, would be worse than useless." Clara folded the letter with trembling fingers. "Martha would twist it, say I forged it out of spite, and then your child would have no protection at all." Silas moved to the window, staring out at the muddy yard where Miguel was mending tack. "Does anyone else know?" "Only Samuel's cousin in Sweetwater Valley. He's the one who warned us about Martha's connections with certain traders. He promised us sanctuary. But now—" She spread her hands helplessly. Silas turned back to her, his face set in lines she recognized from when he discussed ranch business. Planning, calculating, deciding. "The spring cattle drive passes through Sweetwater Valley." Clara's heart jumped. "Mr. Whitlock, I couldn't ask—" "You're not asking, I'm offering." He crossed to her, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his eyes. "No one should have to carry this kind of burden alone, especially not in your condition." The baby chose that moment to kick, hard enough to make Clara gasp. Without thinking, she caught Silas's hand, pressing it to the spot. His fingers spread, wide, warm through the fabric of her dress, and for a moment neither of them breathed. "Life finds a way," he said softly, and Clara knew he wasn't just talking about the baby. "We'll figure this out. Together." The word hung in the air, between them, full of promise and danger both. Clara looked up at him, seeing not just the war-hardened rancher but the man beneath, the one who checked on her every morning, who left books by her bedside, who watched her with eyes that held more than just concern. "Together," she echoed, and felt something shift between them, like winter giving way to spring. But later, alone in her room, Clara pressed her hands to her belly and whispered an apology to her unborn child, because she hadn't told Silas everything. Some secrets were too dangerous to share, even with a man who looked at her like she was the sunrise after endless night. Some truths could get a person killed, and Martha Bellamy wasn't the only one with blood on her hands. Samuel's pocket watch lay heavy in Clara's palm, its hands forever frozen at 10:47. The morning sun caught the scratches on its silver case, battle scars from that final fall. She'd found it tucked away in her Bible's inside pocket, forgotten. Until now, the stage brought mail. Silas's voice from the doorway made her jump. His face was hard, unreadable. Letter for you. Clara's heart stopped at the familiar handwriting on the envelope. Hannah Wheeler, Samuel's cousin's wife, the only person who knew the full truth. But Silas's expression, you had it read too. You in town? Not a question. She could see the paper had been opened, then carefully resealed. The postmaster mentioned a federal marshal's wife was asking after you. Silas's voice was controlled, dangerous. Imagine my surprise when he read about how the widow Bellamy was wanted for questioning in connection with missing army payroll funds. The watch slipped from Clara's fingers, hitting the floor with a damning crack. Silas, don't. He held up a hand. Just don't. I took you in, trusted you with my home, my people. His laugh was bitter. Even started to think, it's not what you think. Clara struggled to rise, her advanced pregnancy making it difficult. Samuel and I were trying to expose a conspiracy? Corruption? Silas's eyes were winter cold. Or were you just covering your tracks, using your condition to play on people's sympathies? The accusation hit like a physical blow. Clara steadied herself against the dresser, one hand protectively covering her belly. If you'd let me explain, the marshal's office has been watching the wagon train for months, Silas cut in, following a trail of missing money. Money that disappeared the same time you and your husband did. Yes. Because we found proof of who was really... Clara stopped, a familiar pain seizing her middle. Not now. Please, not now. But the baby had other ideas. The pain intensified, dropping her to her knees. Through the roaring in her ears, she heard Silas curse, felt his strong arms lifting her. Maria! His voice cracked like a whip. Maria! The next hours passed in a blur of pain and fear. Maria's worried murmurs, Silas's pacing footsteps, the watch ticking away on the floor. Time measured in contractions coming too early, too fast. The baby's turning, Maria announced finally, her lined face grave. If we don't, do what you have to, Clara gasped. She grabbed Silas's sleeve as he turned to leave. Wait! The letter in my Bible. The real letter. Please. Something in her voice must have reached him. He hesitated, then retrieved the Bible from her bedside table. The hidden pocket in the cover yielded its secret, a different letter, written in Samuel's hand the night before he died. Clara watched Silas's face as he read, saw the moment understanding dawned. The proof was all there. Martha Bellamy's embezzlement scheme, her connections to corrupt army quartermasters, the missing payroll money she'd framed Clara and Samuel for stealing. My God, Silas breathed. You were trying to protect the evidence. Samuel died for that truth. Clara's words ended in a cry as another contraction hit. I couldn't let his sacrifice be for nothing. Silas's hand found hers, strong and sure. I'm sorry. I should have. Later, Maria interrupted firmly. The baby comes now. Through the long hours that followed, Silas never left Clara's side. His quiet strength anchored her as Maria worked to turn the breech baby, his voice steady when fear threatened to overwhelm her. Dawn was breaking when the crisis passed. The baby remained stubbornly in place, but the contractions eased. Bed. Rest, Maria ordered. Complete rest or next time. She didn't need to finish the thought. Clara could read the fear in Silas's eyes, feel it in the way his fingers tightened around hers. I'll send word to the marshal's office, he said quietly. Tell them what we know, but you're not facing this alone anymore. Clara touched Samuel's watch, still lying broken on the floor. Time stood still at the moment of his death, but here, now, something new was beginning. She looked up at Silas, saw the promise in his eyes. Together, she whispered. His answer was to lift her hand to his lips, a gesture of courtly tenderness that spoke louder than words. But the shadow that crossed his face suggested he, too, might be keeping secrets. The game they were playing was dangerous, and the stakes had just gotten higher. The marriage certificate was yellow with age, its corners worn soft from handling. But it was the date that caught Silas's eye, just 6 months ago. He looked up from his desk to where Clara sat by the fire, wrapped in a quilt against the spring evening's chill. Forced marriage? His voice was gentle, understanding beginning to dawn. Clara's hands stilled in her mending. Martha Bellamy had evidence that could have destroyed my father's reputation. Samuel, she swallowed hard. Samuel offered marriage as protection. He was kind, but it wasn't love. It became friendship. Clara set aside her sewing. He discovered his mother's schemes almost immediately. We became conspirators instead of lovers. Her smile was sad. He used to joke that we were the most honest fake marriage on the frontier. Silas rose, moving to pour them both tea, though he wished for something stronger. And the baby is Samuel's. One night after we uncovered the worst of the corruption, we both knew we might not survive what was coming. Her voice dropped. He wanted an heir, someone to carry on the fight if... The sentence hung unfinished. Silas handed her the tea, noting how her fingers trembled slightly. 2 weeks of bed rest had left her pale, but more determined than ever. There's something you should know, he said quietly. About why I recognize the army paymaster's name in Samuel's letter. Clara looked up sharply. Captain Harrison? Silas's hand went to his pocket, but instead of the scope, he withdrew a folded paper. I wasn't just a sharpshooter in the war. After Gettysburg, I worked for the Treasury Department, tracking Confederate gold, but some of the men I trusted. He passed her the paper. Harrison was one of them. Clara unfolded the document, a Treasury Department commission authorizing one Silas Whitlock to investigate military corruption. Her eyes widened. You're still working for them. Officially retired. But when reports of missing payroll money started coming in from Montana territory, he shrugged. Old habits. That's why you were so quick to believe I was guilty. There was no accusation in her voice, only understanding. You've seen this kind of corruption before. Lost good men to it. Silas's voice roughened with memory. My partner in '66, they made it look like he was the guilty one, just like they're trying to do with you and Samuel. A log shifted in the fireplace, sending sparks up the chimney. In the quiet, Clara could hear Maria and Miguel talking softly in the kitchen, the comfortable sounds of evening routine. Samuel suspected Harrison was involved, she said finally. He traced payments from the quartermaster's office to private accounts in Helena, but he couldn't prove the connection to Martha. Until he did. Silas moved to the window, staring out at the darkening yard. And it got him killed. The letter proves it. But, Clara touched her belly, as long as I'm carrying his child. Martha won't move against me openly. She's too concerned with appearances. But once the baby comes, you'll both be vulnerable. Silas turned back to her, his face set in lines of decision. Unless, marry me. The words fell into the quiet room like stones into still water. Clara's breath caught. Silas, hear me out. He crossed to her chair, kneeling beside. As my wife, you'd have protection, legal and physical. The baby would have my name, my resources, and together we could finish what Samuel started. It would put you in danger. But Clara's hand had found his, fingers intertwining. I've lived with danger. His thumb traced circles on her palm. What I can't live with is sending you away. These past months, he struggled for words. You've brought something back to this place. To me. Clara looked around the room, at the fresh curtains she'd hung, the neat ledgers on the desk, the garden plans waiting for warmer days. More than that, she looked at the man before her, seeing past the warrior to the gentle heart beneath. Yes, she whispered. Silas's eyes met hers, hope warring with caution. You're sure? Instead of answering, Clara leaned forward and kissed him. Soft questioning touch that quickly deepened into certainty. When they parted, she saw her own feelings reflected in his face. Love, fear, determination. Together, she said firmly. But even as Silas drew her into his arms, Clara felt a shadow cross her heart. Because there was one secret she still hadn't shared, one truth that could destroy everything they were building. The real reason Martha Bellamy hated her went beyond missing money or corrupt officials. It was about blood and lies and a past that was about to catch up with them all. The ranch deed spread across Silas's desk like a battle map, its boundaries marked in fading ink. Clara traced the property lines with her finger, stopping at the creek that bordered Sweetwater Valley. Martha will see this marriage for what it is, a threat to her control. Let her. Silas's voice was steel-edged. He'd spent the morning in town, arranging for the banns to be posted. The deed's ironclad. Once we're married, you and the baby will have legal claim to everything no matter what happens. That's what I'm afraid of. Clara met his eyes. Your ranch, your life's work. I won't be the reason you lose it all. Silas moved behind her chair, his hands warm on her shoulders. I lost everything that mattered once, watching from too far away to help. Never again. The tenderness in his touch made Clara's throat tight. Their engagement was barely 2 days old, but already she felt the shift between them. Cautious affection deepening into something more profound and more dangerous. A knock at the study door interrupted the moment. Miguel entered, his weathered face grave. Riders coming, patron, 6, maybe 7, flying the Bellamy brand. Clara's hand went instinctively to her belly. Silas squeezed her shoulders once before reaching for his gun belt. Get Mrs. Bellamy to the root cellar, he ordered. Maria knows what to do. No. Clara struggled to her feet. I won't hide while you face them. Clara. The way he said her name, soft but urgent, made her heart skip. Please, in your condition, they're here because of me. She squared her shoulders. Let them see me standing beside you. Let them see I'm not afraid. A ghost of a smile touched Silas's lips. Stubborn woman. You knew that when you proposed. Their eyes met, held. In that moment, Clara saw everything he wasn't saying. His fear for her, his admiration, his growing love. She reached for his hand. Twining their fingers together, Miguel cleared his throat. They're at the gate. The riders approached in a cloud of dust, led by a familiar figure. John Wheeler, Samuel's cousin, looked older than Clara remembered. Beside him rode Martha Bellamy, straight-backed and stern as judgment. Well, Martha's voice carried across the yard. I see the rumors are true. My son's widow has found herself. Another protector. Silas's hand tightened on Clara's. Mrs. Bellamy, this is private property. Nothing's private when army money goes missing. Martha's eyes fixed on Clara's belly. Especially when the thief carries my grandchild. We both know who the real thief is. Clara felt Silas's surprise at her boldness. Samuel left proof. Samuel was a fool. Martha's mask slipped, showing something ugly beneath. Just like his father, always pushing where he shouldn't. And you, her laugh was bitter. You're more like your mother than you know. The words hit Clara like a physical blow. Behind her, she felt Silas go very still. Enough, Martha. John Wheeler's voice cracked like a whip. We came to make an offer, not start a war. Speak for yourself. But Martha reined her horse back slightly. Wheeler pulled a document from his coat. $5,000, Clara. Cash. Sign over your rights to Samuel's estate, take your child and go. Start fresh somewhere else. And the evidence. Silas's voice was deadly quiet. Destroyed, of course. Martha's smile was cold. Along with any reputation you might have left, Mr. Whitlock, the Treasury Department takes a dim view of agents who harbor fugitives, so they knew about Silas's past. Clara felt him tense, but his voice remained steady. My resignation was accepted years ago. But your partner's death wasn't quite as clean as the report suggested, was it? Martha's eyes glittered. Amazing what records survive, if you know where to look. Clara felt the threat sink home. This was her fault. Her presence putting at risk everything and everyone she'd grown to love. The baby kicked as if sensing her distress. 24 hours. Wheeler's voice was almost kind. Think it over, Clara. For everyone's sake. They rode away in the same cloud of dust, leaving behind the taste of ashes and the weight of impossible choices. Clara turned to Silas, seeing in his face the same battle between heart and duty that raged in her own. Whatever you're thinking, He said quietly, "Stop. We face this together." But later, watching him study the ranch deed by lamplight, Clara made her decision. She couldn't let another good man die protecting her secrets. Tomorrow, she would tell him everything, about her mother, about Martha's real hold over her family, about the truth that would change everything. She only prayed he could forgive her. The doctor's journal lay open on Maria's kitchen table, its pages filled with neat observations about Clara's condition. "Patient shows signs of severe preeclampsia," Dr. Morgan had written. "Bed rest essential. Delivery may be necessary if symptoms worsen." Silas read the words for the 100th time, his coffee growing cold beside him. Clara slept upstairs, finally resting after a night of frightening symptoms. Blurred vision, splitting headache, hands and feet swollen past recognition. "The tea helps, Patron." Maria set a fresh cup before him, the bitter herbs steaming. "But the baby comes soon, whether we wish it or not." "Too soon." Silas's voice was rough with exhaustion. They'd spent the night watching Clara's blood pressure climb, helpless to do more than apply cool cloths and pray. "Sometimes God has his own timing." Maria touched the cross at her throat. "But there is something you should know." A scream from upstairs cut through the dawn quiet. Silas was moving before the sound died, taking the stairs 2 at a time. He found Clara doubled over in bed, face white with pain. "The baby," she gasped. "Something's wrong." Maria appeared with her medicine box, already pulling out herbs and bandages. But Silas saw the fear in her eyes. This was beyond herbal remedies. "We need Morgan." He grabbed his coat. "Miguel can ride." "No time." Clara's grip on his hand was desperate. "Silas, listen. If something happens—" She fumbled at her neck, pulling free a tiny key on a ribbon. "My mother's diary, in the blue trunk. You have to—" Another contraction hit, stealing her words. "Save your strength." He tried to pull away, but she held on. "Promise me, whatever you read, remember I was going to tell you. Tonight. I was going to—" "Clara." He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Nothing in that diary changes anything. Do you hear me? Nothing." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You don't know what I am. What Martha knows about my mother and—" Her body arched in pain. "Patron," Maria's voice cracked like a whip. "The doctor now!" Silas kissed Clara's forehead, tasting salt and fear. "Hold on, love. Just hold on." The ride to town was a blur of mud and urgency. Dr. Morgan was already up, thank God, preparing for his morning rounds. One look at Silas's face told him everything. "Martha." "Bellamy's in town," the doctor warned as they rode back. "Staying at Wheeler's place. She's been asking questions." "Let her ask." Silas's voice was ice. "Just save them both." But when they arrived, the ranch was too quiet. Miguel met them at the gate, his face ashen. "Maria says to hurry." They found Clara unconscious, her breathing shallow. Maria had stripped the bed, and there was blood. Too much blood. The next hours passed in a nightmare of medical terms and desperate measures. Morgan worked steadily, his calm voice belying the gravity of the situation. "The baby's in distress," he said finally. "We need to deliver now, or we'll lose them both." Silas looked at Clara's pale face, remembering her words about the diary. Whatever secret she carried, whatever Martha held over her, none of it mattered against this moment. "Do it." Morgan nodded grimly. "Hold her hand. She'll need your strength." Clara's eyes fluttered open as the doctor prepared his instruments. "Silas, I'm here." He gripped her hand, forcing a smile. "Being stubborn again, aren't you?" A ghost of a laugh, then pain twisted her features. "The diary that you have to understand." "Shh." He brushed sweat-damp hair from her forehead. "Tell me after. Tell me everything. If I don't you dare." His voice broke. "We face everything together, remember?" Morgan cleared his throat. "It's time." Clara's fingers tightened on Silas's as the doctor began his work. Outside, a spring storm was building, thunder rolling across the valley, like distant gunfire. But in that room, Time narrowed to heartbeats and breaths, to whispered prayers, and the fierce determination of a woman fighting for 2 lives. And in the blue trunk beneath Clara's bed, a diary waited, its pages holding secrets that would shake the foundations of everything they thought they knew about love, loyalty, and the true price of redemption. The land claim map crackled as Silas spread it across his desk, its worn surface showing the boundaries between the Whitlock Ranch and Sweetwater Valley. Fresh ink marked disputed water rights, pressure points where Martha could squeeze them, dry if she chose, but his mind wasn't on water rights. Upstairs, Clara was fighting her way back from the edge, the baby's fate still uncertain after 36 hours of labor. Dr. Morgan hadn't left her side, his grave face saying more than words. Could a knock at the study door? Miguel entered, his expression warning trouble. Riders coming, Wheeler and the marshal this time. Silas's hand went to his gun belt, but Miguel shook his head. There's more. Maria found something when changing the sheets. He placed a small object on the desk, a lady's gold locket, its surface scratched and tarnished. Clara's... No, Patron. Look inside. Silas opened the catch. The photograph was faded but clear enough. A younger Martha Bellamy, standing beside a woman who could have been Clara's twin. The inscription read, "Sisters Forever, Martha and Rose, 1856. The pieces clicked into place with the force of a physical blow. Rose was Clara's mother. Miguel nodded. Maria says there's more in the diary. But before Silas could respond, hoofbeats thundered into the yard. He moved to the window, counting riders. Wheeler and the marshal he recognized. The other 3 men were strangers, hard-faced and heavily armed. Get back to Clara, Silas ordered. Whatever happens, keep her safe. The marshal, Jenkins was his name, dismounted first. His face was apologetic but determined. Mr. Whitlock, we have a warrant to search the premises. On what grounds? Harboring a fugitive, Wheeler answered, producing a paper. And conspiracy to conceal evidence in a federal investigation. Silas's laugh was bitter. Martha's working fast. This goes beyond Martha. Jenkins shifted uncomfortably. Treasury departments reopened the investigation into your partner's death. New evidence has surfaced. Convenient timing. Wheeler stepped forward, his voice low. Be reasonable, Whitlock. Clara's in no condition to run. The baby's coming any day. Help us find the proof she took from Samuel, and we can protect them both. A cry of pain drifted down from the upper floor. Silas's hands clenched, but he kept his voice steady. You want proof? I'll show you proof. He turned to his desk, reaching for the handle of the bottom drawer, where Samuel's letter lay hidden. The gun clicked behind him. Hands where we can see them. Silas turned slowly. One of the strangers had his rifle trained center mass. Professional stance, dead eyes, not just hired muscle then, government men. Thing about proof, the man said softly, is it works both ways. That letter you're reaching for could just as easily damn you as save her. Understanding dawned. You're Harrison's men. A thin smile. Captain sends his regards, says to tell you some debts don't die with time. The sound of running feet on the stairs. Maria appeared in the doorway, her face flushed. Patron, the baby... A shot cracked the air. Maria stumbled, red blooming on her shoulder. Miguel caught her as she fell. Everything happened at once. Silas dove for his desk as more shots rang out. Wheeler shouted something about orders. The marshal cursed. Through it all, Silas heard Clara calling his name from upstairs, fear-making, her voice sharp. His fingers found what they sought, not in the drawer, but taped beneath the desk. The small derringer his sister had carried, loaded with 2 rounds of mercy. Rebecca's last gift, saved for desperate times. Enough! Wheeler's voice cut through the chaos. Nobody else needs to die here. Too late for that. Silas's voice was, Ace, you brought killers to my home, threatened my people. He rose slowly, the derringer hidden against his leg. Now you have 10 seconds to clear my property. Or what? You'll die playing hero? The gunman's laugh was ugly. "Face it, Whitlock. You're outnumbered and outplayed." A new voice joined the fray, weak but clear as a bell. "No, he's not." Clara stood at the top of the stairs, pale as death but upright. In her hands she held the blue diary and Martha's ledger. Both were wrapped in a bundle of papers that Silas recognized as Treasury Department codes. "My mother was Treasury too," she said softly. "Deep cover in the Bellamy organization. Martha killed her when she found out, just like she killed Samuel when he discovered the truth." Her smile was terrible in its gentleness. "And now you're all going to learn what a dying woman can do with 20 years of gathered secrets." The baby blanket lay half-finished on Clara's lap, its pattern of interwoven hearts left incomplete when the labor pains began. Silas had started. During those long nights of watching over her, his rough hands learning gentleness with needle and thread. Now it caught the last rays of sunset as Clara fought through another contraction. "Almost there," Dr. Morgan encouraged. But his eyes told a different story. The strain of confrontation had sent Clara into full labor, complications multiplying, like shadows at dusk. "The papers," Clara gasped, gripping Silas's hand. "Did Miguel get them to the marshal's office?" "Shh." Silas brushed sweat-damp hair from her forehead. "Miguel and Maria are safe in town. The papers are on their way to Denver by special courier. It's over." But Clara shook her head, another pain building. "Not over. Martha. She'll come herself now. Nothing left to lose." As if summoned by her words, hoofbeats sounded in the yard. Silas moved to the window, Winchester ready. Through the gathering dark, a single rider approached, a woman sitting straight as vengeance in her saddle. "Keep her calm," Morgan ordered, pressing a cold cloth to Clara's face. "The baby's under stress." Silas hesitated, torn between love and duty. Clara made the choice for him. "Go," she whispered. "End this, for all of us." He kissed her once, hard and quick, then headed downstairs. Behind him, Clara's cry of pain mixed with the sound of boots on the porch. Martha Bellamy stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the dying light. Her gun was steady in her hand, but her eyes were wild with something beyond anger. "Where is she?" "Put the gun down, Martha." Silas kept his voice calm, though his finger rested light on the trigger. "It's finished. The evidence is already on its way to Denver." "Evidence?" Martha's laugh was bitter as winter wind. "You think this is about money, about corruption?" She moved into the room, each step deliberate. "This is about blood, about justice. Justice for Rose." Silas saw the shot hit home. "We know she was Treasury. Know you killed her." "I killed a traitor." Martha's voice shook. "My own sister spying on her family. And now her daughter," she spat the word like poison. "She'll pay for her mother's sins." Upstairs, Clara screamed. The sound seemed to freeze time itself. Martha's gun wavered. "My grandchild." "Your grandchild will never know you." Clara's voice drifted down the stairs, weak but clear. "Just like I never knew my aunt. The aunt who chose greed over family, power over love." "You know nothing about love," Martha started. "For the stairs," but Silas blocked her path. "Your sister loved you enough to try to save you," he said quietly. "Samuel loved Clara enough to die protecting her, and I love her enough to end this, here, now." Something broke in Martha's face. Years of hatred cracking like river ice in spring. Her gun clattered to the floor as she sank to her knees. "She chose them," she whispered. "Rose chose the law over her own blood. She chose right over wrong." Clara appeared at the top of the stairs, leaning heavily on Dr. Morgan. Her face was gray with exhaustion, but her eyes blazed. "Like Samuel did, like I'm doing now." The baby chose that moment to make its final demand. Clara doubled over, Morgan barely catching her. Silas was up the stairs in 3 strides, gathering her into his arms. "Martha," Clara managed between pains, "you can still choose. Help us, please." For a long moment, only harsh breathing broke the silence. Then Martha moved slowly, deliberately. She removed her gun belt, set it aside. When she spoke, her voice, held the weight of 20 years of bitterness, finally set down. The baby's breach. I was a midwife before everything. Let me help. The next hours passed in a blur of pain and purpose. Martha's hands were sure, her voice steady, as she guided Clara through the final stages. When the baby finally came, a girl, red-faced and angry at the world. It was Martha who caught her, Martha who cleared her airways and wrapped her in the half-finished blanket. "Rose," Clara whispered, touching her daughter's cheek. "Her name is Rose." Silas saw Martha's hands tremble as she handed the baby to Clara. In that moment, watching aunt and niece look down at the newest branch of their troubled family tree, he understood something about healing, about how love could bridge even the deepest wounds. Dawn was breaking when the marshal arrived to take Martha away. She went quietly, pausing only to press a kiss to baby Rose's forehead. "Tell her the truth when she's old enough," she said softly. "All of it, the good and the bad." Clara nodded, tears tracking down her cheeks. "We will." The sheriff's badge caught the morning light as Marshal Jenkins laid it on Silas's desk. "Captain Harrison was arrested an hour ago in Denver. His men are in custody, too." He smiled grimly. Those treasury codes in Rose's diary broke the whole thing wide open. 3 days had passed since Rose's birth. Clara sat in the chair by the window, the baby nursing beneath a soft shawl. The morning sun painted them both in gold, making them look like something from a painting, Madonna and Child, frontier style. And Martha? Clara's voice was stronger now, though exhaustion still shadowed her eyes. Cooperating fully, Jenkins removed his hat, running a hand through graying hair. 20 years of records, names, dates. She's trading information for consideration in sentencing. Silas moved to stand behind Clara's chair, his hand resting light on her shoulder. "The Wagon train families will get their money back with interest." The marshal's expression softened as he looked at Rose. Martha made sure the restitution accounts were in order before she surrendered. Said it was her gift to her granddaughter, a clean slate. Clara's free hand found Silas's, squeezing tight. They both remembered Martha's face in that dawn hour, how she'd held Rose like something precious and fragile before the marshal led her away. "There's something else." Jenkins produced an envelope, aged and carefully sealed. "Found this in Harrison's papers. It's from your mother, Clara, dated the week before she died." Clara's breath caught. The baby stirred, sensing her tension, and Silas took Rose while Clara opened the letter with trembling fingers. "My dearest daughter," she read aloud, voice catching. "If you're reading this, then Martha has finally faced the truth about herself, about us, about the choices that tore our family apart. I know you'll have questions about why I chose duty over blood, why I left you with your father while I played my role in the Bellamy organization. The answer is simple, though it took me years to understand it. Love sometimes means fighting against the very people we love to save them from themselves." Rose cooed softly in Silas's arms. Clara wiped tears from her cheeks and continued reading. "Martha was my sister, my best friend, my other half. Watching her fall into corruption broke my heart, but staying silent would have broken my soul. Remember this, my darling girl. True love, for family, for justice, for what's right, always comes with a price. The question isn't whether to pay it, but whether we can live with ourselves if we don't." The letter trembled in Clara's hands. She knew Martha would eventually. "Your mother was the best agent I ever worked with," Jenkins said quietly. "She predicted everything. Martha's reaction when the truth came out, Samuel's discovery of the evidence, even your role in finally bringing it all to light. But she couldn't predict Rose." Clara reached for her daughter, holding her close. Couldn't know that healing would come with new life. Silas picked up the badge from his desk, studying its reflection. "What happens now? Trials will start. Next month in Denver." Jenkins stood, settling his hat back on his head. "Clara's testimony won't be needed. Martha's confession covers everything. You can stay here, build your life." He smiled. "Raise that little girl in peace." After he left, Clara and Silas sat in quiet communion, watching Rose sleep. The morning sun painted shadows across the floor, not dark ones now, but gentle, like the patterns in the baby blanket Martha had helped finish during those long birth hours. "Your mother would be proud," Silas said softly. Both of them, Rose and Rebecca. Clara looked up at him, seeing in his face the same wonder she felt. Think they know, somehow, that their sacrifices led to this? Silas knelt beside her chair, one hand gentle on Rose's dark curls. "I think love echoes across time and blood and choices, like that letter finding its way to you just when you needed your mother's wisdom most. And Martha, can she find peace too? She chose love in the..." Silas's voice was thoughtful. "Not soon enough to erase the past, but soon enough to give Rose a future, free from its shadows." Rose stirred, yawning, and Clara watched her daughter's face, seeing traces of Samuel's chin, her own eyes, and something uniquely new. A fresh page, waiting to be written. "Together," she whispered, an echo of earlier promises. Silas's kiss was gentle as morning light. "Together." Outside, spring was painting the valley green, covering winter's scars with new growth. Inside, a family born of loss and love and redemption held each other close, knowing that some reckonings end not in judgment, but in grace. The family portrait sat fresh from the photographer's studio, silver frame catching afternoon light. Clara studied the image, herself seated with Rose in her lap, Silas standing proud behind them, Maria and Miguel flanking them like guardian angels. Their first formal photograph as a family, taken just before their wedding day. The wagon train. "Families are settling their claims," Silas said, entering the study with a stack of letters. "Wheelers handling the distributions. Seems Martha left detailed records of every transaction." Clara touched the frame gently, trying to make it right in her own way. She'd visited Martha in the territorial prison last week, watching her. Aunt Cradle rose with tears, tracking down her weathered cheeks. Some wounds could never fully heal, but they could scar over, become bearable. Speaking of making things right, Silas laid a document before her. "Judge Hawkins approved the adoption papers this morning. Rose is legally a Whitlock now." Clara's vision blurred. Samuel's daughter carrying Silas's name. It should have felt complicated, but instead it felt like completion, like pieces of a broken heart finally mending true. "Maria's beside herself planning the wedding feast," she said, wiping her eyes. "Though I told her we don't need any fuss." "Let her fuss." Silas's smile was tender. "She's earned it. We all have." Rose stirred, in her cradle by the window, making the small snuffling sounds that preceded waking. Clara moved to lift her, but Silas got there first. His big hands were impossibly gentle as he cradled their daughter. Their daughter. The thought still caught her sometimes, how love could rebuild itself from ashes, how family could be born from more than blood. "Had a letter from Martha this morning," she said quietly. "She's teaching other women in the prison to read. Says it helps her feel closer to my mother somehow, carrying on Rose's work of helping others better themselves. Your mother would be proud of you both." Silas settled in his chair, Rose content against his chest. "Choosing healing over hatred isn't easy." "No." Clara perched on the arm of his chair, letting Rose grip her finger. But neither was loving a stubborn widower who thought his heart was too scarred for second chances. His free hand caught hers, bringing it to his lips. "Stubborn seems to run in the family." Through the open window came the sounds of Maria singing in her kitchen garden, Miguel's deep laugh harmonizing. The spring air carried sense of new growth and possibility. Even the study felt different now, less a fortress of solitude, more the heart of a home renewed. "The past doesn't go away," Clara mused, watching Rose's eyes drift closed. "But it changes shape, doesn't it? Becomes something we can carry without breaking under its weight. Like your mother's diary?" Silas nodded toward the blue trunk where they kept it now, along with Samuel's letters and the evidence that had brought justice. "Or my sister's memory? Like everything that led us here." Clara leaned down to kiss him, soft and sure. All the grief and guilt and fear that somehow turned to love. Rose made a small, contented sound between them. Outside, a meadowlark called to its mate, and somewhere in the distance, church bells rang for evening service. The portrait caught the last sunlight, silver frame throwing back gentle fire, as if to remind them that even the hardest metal could be shaped into something beautiful. "When she's older," Silas said, touching Rose's dark curls, "we'll tell her everything, about both her fathers, both her grandmothers, about courage and redemption, and how love doesn't always follow the paths we expect, and about her Aunt Martha." Clara's voice was gentle with understanding. "About how even the deepest wounds can heal. Everything," Silas promised. "The hard parts and the beautiful ones. She deserves to know she comes from strong stock on all sides." Clara settled closer, fitting herself and Rose into the circle of his arms. The portrait watched over them, capturing this moment of peace they'd all fought so hard to find. Not an ending, but a beginning, as all true healing must be. "Together," she whispered, making it both memory and promise. Silas's arms tightened around his family. "Together," he echoed, and in his voice was the certainty of a man who had finally found his way home. The ranch brand glowed red-hot in the forge, its modified design incorporating Clara's flowing C with the original Whitlock W. Miguel worked the bellows while Silas studied the pattern, making sure every line was perfect. "A good omen," Miguel said, his weathered face bright with approval. "The old and new becoming one." Through the forge window, they could see Clara in the garden, Rose sleeping against her chest in a sling Maria had fashioned. The June morning painted everything in shades of promise, from the new roses climbing the porch to the fresh painted trim on the house. "The judge is ready whenever we are," Silas said, testing the brand's weight. "But Clara wants to wait for Martha's response." They'd sent the letter 3 weeks ago, asking Martha to give her blessing for the wedding. Not permission, Clara was past needing that, but acknowledgement of this new chapter, recognition that healing went both ways. "It will come," Miguel said with quiet certainty. "The heart knows its own time." As if summoned by his words, they heard the distant rhythm of hoofbeats. The morning stage was early, dust rising behind it like a wedding veil. Clara looked up from her gardening, one hand shading her eyes. Even at this distance, Silas could read the hope in her posture. The stage didn't slow, but the driver tossed down a packet as he passed. Miguel's grandson, Tommy, who'd appointed himself unofficial ranch messenger, snatched it up and ran to Clara with all the dignity of his 8 years. Silas set the brand aside, watching through the window as Clara opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Her free hand pressed to her mouth, and he was moving before he consciously decided to, Miguel's knowing smile following him out. "What is it, love?" Clara handed him the letter, careful not to disturb Rose. Martha's handwriting was neat and clear, though the paper showed signs of being written and rewritten. "My dear Clara and Mr. Whitlock," he read aloud, "your letter found me well, and more at peace than I've been in 20 years. The prison library is growing, and 2 of my students have learned to write their own letters home. I think of Rose, both Roses every day, and how pride and fear can blind us to the truths our hearts know." Clara leaned against him as he continued reading. "I have no right to give or withhold blessings, but if you wish for one, take this. May your marriage be built on the foundation of truth we all paid so dearly to uncover. May Rose grow strong in the knowledge that love can survive even our worst mistakes. And may you both find in each other what I lost sight of so long ago, the courage to choose love over fear, healing over hatred, future over past." Rose stirred in her sling, making the small, snuffling sounds that meant she was hungry. Clara shifted her to nurse, as natural now as breathing. "There's more," she said softly. "Look at the bottom." Silas turned the page. A small key fell into his palm, along with a note in different handwriting, Wheeler's. "Martha asked me to send this. It opens a strongbox in the Helena Bank containing your mother's personal effects. Wedding jewels, family photographs, letters she never sent. Martha saved them all, even while denying their importance. She says it's time they came home to you. Clara's eyes filled. I never thought. All these years I assumed everything of my mother's was lost. Nothing's ever truly lost. Silas tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, just waiting to be found again. Rose finished nursing and looked up at them both. Samuel's chin and Clara's eyes combined with something uniquely her own. A legacy of love, surviving against all odds. Tomorrow, Clara asked quietly. For the wedding? Silas kissed her temple. Tomorrow. Miguel appeared in the forge doorway, holding up the finished brand. In the morning light, the combined initials looked like a promise made permanent in steel. Time to mark the spring calves, he said, eyes twinkling. New beginnings all around. Clara laughed, the free, joyous sound that had first made Silas realize he was falling in love with her. Everything new, she agreed, everything possible. But later, as sunset painted the valley in wedding eve colors, they sat on the porch swing while Rose slept in her cradle beside them. The modified brand hung in its place of honor by the door, old and new forged into something stronger than either could be alone. Tell me again, Clara murmured, fitting herself against his side, about how love rebuilds itself. No need to tell, Silas said softly. We're living it. The new family Bible lay open on the parlor table, its pages recording a year's worth of joy. Clara traced the entries with gentle fingers, her marriage to Silas, Rose's adoption, births and baptisms, and small daily blessings that added up to a life rebuilt. Mama, Papa. Rose's wobbly steps carried her across the parlor, dark, curls bouncing. At 14 months, she was a force of nature, combining Samuel's determination with Silas's quiet strength. Silas caught her before she could topple into the table, swinging her high. There's our girl, ready for your party dress. Today marked a year since their wedding, but it was more than that. Martha was being released tomorrow, her sentence reduced for good behavior and cooperation. She'd be joining them for Rose's delayed baptism, a gathering that would bring together all the broken pieces of their shared history. The Wheeler wagon just passed the lower gate, Maria announced from the window. She'd spent days preparing, determined that this celebration would heal old wounds and honor new bonds. Clara smoothed her best dress, touching the cameo at her throat, one of her mother's pieces from Martha's strongbox. Is everything ready? Food for 40, flowers from your garden on every table, and Miguel's grandson Tommy practicing his very important job as ring-bearer. Maria's eyes twinkled. Though why you need a ring-bearer for a baptism? Because some promises deserve to be made twice, Silas said quietly. He set Rose down to toddle toward her toys, but kept his eyes on Clara. Some bonds grow stronger, with renewal. They discussed it late into the night, whether to combine Rose's baptism with a renewal of their wedding vows, whether Martha's presence would heal or hurt. But in the end, Clara had known it was right. Full circle all the way around, a commotion at the door heralded the arrival of John Wheeler and his wife Hannah, their arms full of packages. Behind them came familiar faces from town, from the ranch, from the restored wagon train families. And there, stepping carefully onto the porch, was Martha. Prison had changed her. The proud bearing remained, but her eyes were softer, her smile uncertain, but real. She carried a small package wrapped in silk. Clara. Her voice wavered. Silas, I wasn't sure. Welcome home, Clara said firmly, and pulled her aunt into an embrace that was 20 years overdue. Martha's tears fell hot on Clara's shoulder. When they parted, both women were laughing and crying at once. Rose, curious about the newcomer, wandered over to study this stranger who had her mama's eyes. Hello, little one. Martha knelt, arthritic knees protesting. I brought you something. It belonged to your grandmothers, both of them. The silk fell away to reveal a child's silver brush and comb set, engraved with roses and worn smooth with generations of use. Clara gasped, recognizing it from old photographs. Mama gave this. To you when we were girls, she whispered. Martha nodded. And your mother polished it every Sunday, dreaming of the daughter she'd pass it to. She held it out to Rose, who touched the silver with wondering fingers. Some legacies skip a generation to find their rightful home. The afternoon unfolded. Like a flower opening to sun, Rose's baptism brought tears to every eye, especially when Silas and Clara renewed their vows with the child between them. Martha stood witness, her face shining with a peace Clara had never seen there before. Later, as sunset painted the garden in golden light, Clara found Silas by the rose arbor. Happy, he pulled her close, both of them watching Rose toddle between. Guests collecting kisses and cookies with equal determination. Martha sat with Maria, heads bent over family photographs, sharing stories that needed no translation. More than happy, Silas murmured. Complete. From the open Bible on the parlor table to the silver brush in Rose's tiny hands. From Martha's hard-won wisdom to Maria's endless love, they had built something rare and precious, a family forged in fire, tempered by truth, and strengthened by scars that had healed into wisdom. "Tell me again," Silas whispered, an echo of countless conversations, about how love rebuilds itself. Clara smiled up at him, their daughter's laughter carrying across the garden like a benediction. "No need to tell," she echoed his words from a year ago. "We're still living it." The letter to their daughter lay between them on Silas's desk, the ink still drying. They'd worked on it together all evening, finding words to bridge past and future, to explain the legacy Rose would inherit. "My dearest Rose," Clara read aloud, her voice soft in the lamplit study. "Someday, when you're old enough to understand, you'll have questions about your family, about the people who loved you, fought for you, and found their way back to grace through you. This is our attempt to answer those questions, to give you the truth you deserve." Silas's hand found hers as she continued reading. "Your first father, Samuel, was a brave man who died protecting what was right. He gave you his strength, his sense of justice, and his unflinching courage in the face of wrong. Never doubt that he loved you, even before you were born. Your grandmother Rose, my mother, was a woman who understood that love sometimes means fighting for people's souls, even when it costs us everything. She gave you her name, her spirit, and through the mysteries of blood and memory, her eyes that see straight to the heart of things. Your Aunt Martha learned the hardest lesson of all, that it's never too late to choose love over pride, healing over hatred. She gave you the gift of knowing that redemption is possible, no matter how far we've strayed from grace. And your Papa Silas," Clara's voice caught as she read the words they'd written together. "He gave you his name, his heart, and the kind of love that doesn't need blood ties to bind souls together. He showed us all that family is something we build, choice by choice and day by day. You come from a line of complex, imperfect people who learned to forgive, to heal, to love better than they were taught. The silver brush you use each morning belonged to both your grandmothers. The Bible on our parlor table holds both tears and joy. The brand on our cattle marks not just ownership, but unity forged from separate paths joining as one. Remember, precious girl, that your story began in winter's darkest hour, but bloomed in spring's sweetest dawn. You were born from loss, but grew in love, carried by faith when hope seemed lost, and delivered into a family that chose each other over and over again. When you hear whispers about the past, about wagon trains and secrets, about justice and redemption, know this: every choice that brought us here was made with love. Every scar that healed made us stronger. Every tear that fell watered the garden of our happiness. You are our miracle, our bridge between what was and what can be. In you we see the best of all who came before: Samuel's courage, Rose's wisdom, Martha's hard-won grace, and the love that brought your mama and papa together under God's sweet mercy. Grow strong, dear heart. Grow wise. Know that you are cherished, not just by those here to hold you, but by those watching from heaven's galleries. Know that your family's story isn't one of tragedy, but of triumph, not of endings, but of beginnings that grow more beautiful with each passing season. With all our love, for all your days, Mama and Papa. Clara set the letter down, turning to find tears in Silas's eyes matching her own. Through the open window came the night sounds of their ranch, cattle lowing softly, crickets singing, the distant whisper of wind in cottonwoods. Upstairs, Rose slept peacefully, surrounded by love that had survived every test. "Think we got it right?" Silas asked softly. Clara stood, drawing him up with her. Together they moved to the window, looking out at the land that had sheltered their journey from strangers to family. The moon painted everything in silver light, turning the garden's roses to pearls and the distant mountains to guardians keeping. "Watch, we got it right," she whispered, fitting herself against him like a key into its lock. Not just the letter, everything. His arms tightened around her, and in their embrace was every promise kept, every wound healed, every choice vindicated by love's patient work. Above them, stars wheeled in their ancient paths, witnessing this moment of completion that was also a beginning. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own joys. Rose would grow, their love would deepen, and the legacy they'd written would unfold in ways they couldn't imagine. But for now, in the quiet of their home, they held each other and knew that some stories don't end. They simply flow on, like rivers joining the sea, carrying hope and memory toward horizons yet undreamed.